And this is how chapter 13 of Judges begins. Verse 1. Again, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. In verse 2, God's word says, Now there was a certain man from Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And one commentary states regarding these things, Zorah was in the foothills west of Jerusalem, near Philistine territory, in whose territory Zorah lay. So Zorah was in Judah, and it was close to Philistine territory. Manoah, Samson's father, was of the tribe of Dan. So the people of Israel had been given into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. And the people that we want to study, not just today, but today will be the first lesson in a 4-part series on the life and legacy of Samson. But we'll see how this people, the Danites, and more specifically Manoah and his family, they lived very close to Philistine territory, and that would be an important part of God's plan. We'll look at that over the next Sundays. But God chose them to do an incredible thing. And as Bible readers, we know that the book of Judges is very special. It's before the time of kings, when God chose men and women of faith to not only save his people repeatedly from slavery, but also then to lead his people for a number of years. So it was a very interesting book. And in our text, we see that God was just about to do this again. He was just about to choose a judge who would not only redeem his people, but also lead his people. But this time, God would do it in a very special way, different than he had ever done before. And we want to read about that in verses 3 through to 5. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, so this is Samson's mother, Indeed, now you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now therefore, please be careful not to drink wine or similar drink, and not to eat anything unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. So instead of calling an adult male or a female to be the next judge over God's people, God would help a barren woman, someone who could not conceive a child, to have a child. And this child was to be a Nazirite, not a Nazarene, right? A Nazarene is somebody who was born in Nazareth, okay? So Jesus is a Nazarene. But a Nazirite is something else. A Nazirite was a person who took a vow to be set apart for the service of God. Samson's parents made this vow for him. Normally, it would be the person himself who would be the Nazarene and take that vow. A Nazirite vow was sometimes temporary for over a few years, but in Samson's case, it was for life, from his birth, even before he was born, until his death. As a Nazirite, Samson could not cut his hair, touch a dead body, or drink anything containing alcohol. We want to remember these points as well as we continue to examine his life and future lessons. And Manoah's wife was to live like a Nazirite during the time of her pregnancy. She was to refrain from all of these unclean things and remain pure and undefiled. And I find this to be a beautiful biblical example of how God considers the value of the life of an unborn child. The unborn are precious in the sight of the Lord. You know, our society today says, you know what, the unborn child has no worth. They're just a body of cells. That's all they are. And here God says, no, even you, while you are pregnant, you need to live the life of a Nazirite, because the child within you is a Nazirite. And you need to remain pure and undefiled. And after hearing this incredible news, Manoah's wife repeated all of these things to her husband because he was not there. And once informed, Manoah does several praiseworthy things that reveal his character and show us that he was a righteous man who loved God and served him from the heart. Verse 8 tells us that as soon as Manoah was made aware of these events, he prayed. He prayed to the Lord and said, "Oh, my Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come to us again and teach us what we shall do for the child who will be born." So Manoah believed. He believed God first and foremost, and he believed his wife as well. He never doubted according to this verse. As soon as he heard it, he wanted more information. And let's remember the context that he lived in. To find a man of God who believed God was a rare thing at that time. The majority of the Israelites had forsaken God. That's why God had delivered them into the hands of the Philistines, to be enslaved by them for 40 years. But here was a man of God who believed this message, who believed his wife when he heard these wonderful things. And although he believed, he had a lot of questions. So what do people of God do when they have questions? Or what do people of God do when they face uncertainties? We pray. Yeah, that should be our number one response. It should be something that we don't even think about. We immediately go on our knees and we pray. We inquire of God. And that's exactly what Manoah did. Manoah's immediate response was to go to God in prayer. He prays to God as being his Lord. He calls him my Lord, which means the leader of his life. In our day and age, we hear that word quite a bit, Lord, and yet we don't use it in our society anymore. We don't know what that word means. But when we call God our Lord, that means, Lord, I am your servant. That means you lead my life. That means I will obey you. I will faithfully follow your leading. He prays, my Lord, please let the man of God whom you send come to us again and teach us what we shall do for the child who will be born. Now, fathers, can you recall the moments of when your first child were born? Kan vi tre dingen til dan van ans oudste geboren werd? That's ganz klar, right? It stamps into our mind forever. I can picture it. When our oldest was born, I can picture the chair I sat on. I can picture the room I was in. When our oldest was born, my wife, Karina, she needed medical attention right away. So they wrapped up this baby, chubby little baby, hand him off to Dad, here you go. And Karina was gone for like an hour, and I just sat there, trying not to make the baby cry. Yahweh, right? Like, what happens then if the baby starts crying? Mom's not here to nurse him. And I remember thinking of that humongous, tremendous weight that God placed on my shoulders. I remember praying, God, help me. I want to be a good father. Help me. I have no idea what I'm doing. No idea. Maybe as fathers, maybe you had some idea. You think you do, and then the baby comes. And then you realize how little you know about being a father. And Manoah, as soon as he finds out he's going to be a dad, he goes to the Lord in prayer. I can relate to that. He prays, Lord, I need help. If we look at verses 9 through to 12, we see that God heard his prayer. The Bible says, and God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came to the woman again. And she was sitting in the field, but Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So again, he wasn't there. But then the woman ran in haste and told her husband and said to him, look, the man who came to me the other day has just now appeared to me. So Manoah arose and followed his wife. And when he came to the man, he said to him, Are you the man who spoke to this woman? And he said, I am. And Manoah said, Now let your words come to pass. But what will be the boy's rule of life in his work? So Manoah was so excited. First thing he says, please let it happen like you said, that we can have a child. And then the next thing, he seeks clarification as to what it meant that his wife would conceive, to what it meant that they would bear a Nazirite. Most likely they had no idea back then what a Nazirite was. The people of God didn't follow his word anymore. He wanted to know what that meant. He wanted answers to all these questions that were racing through his head. And so the angel repeated to him what he had already spoken to his wife. And after the second visit, Manoah wanted to express his thankfulness. This is another praiseworthy thing. He wanted to express his thankfulness to the angel of the Lord. Verse 15 says, "Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, 'Please let us detain you, and we will prepare a young goat for you.'" So he wanted to invite his angelic guest into his home. He wanted to honor him in this way. Verse 17, we see this again. He wanted to know what the angel's name was. He wanted to honor him. And refusing to be honored and refusing to give his name, the angel of the Lord suggests that Manoah offer to the Lord an offering. And that's exactly what Manoah did. Shows us that he was obedient as well as thankful. Let's read about that offering. Verses 19 and 20. "So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered upon the rock to the Lord. And he did a wondrous thing while Manoah and his wife looked on. It happened as the flame went up toward heaven from the altar that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. And when Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground." What a wonderful sight. Manoah and his wife not only honored their messenger, not only thanked God for this wonderful prophecy, they also worshiped God with the fear of the Lord. So what we've examined in our study so far, we can conclude that Manoah was a righteous man. He was an upright man. He was a man of faith who believed his wife and who believed his Lord, God. He was a man of prayer who sought the Lord's leading in his life, who sought the Lord's instruction in his life. He was a thankful man who desired to honor and to praise and to worship the Lord. And I imagine that all of these qualities of his contributed to God choosing him and his wife to be the parents of the next judge over Israel. They obeyed everything that God told them to do. And Scripture says because of their obedience, everything happened just as God had promised. Verses 24 and 25, "So the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the child grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him at Mahaneh Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol." So according to these verses, everything seemed to be going perfect. Manoah and his wife were upright people. Samson was born. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and it says that the Holy Spirit even started to work through him. And yet we know that the story of Samson doesn't end here. And if we continue to read the account of Samson, which we will over these next weeks, we discover that he wasn't like his father. He was different. Scripture often describes Samson as a strong-headed, arrogant, proud, foolish, and selfish man. Yes, outwardly he was strong, but inwardly he was weak in the sight of the Lord. In Proverbs 20, verse 7 says, "The righteous man walks in his integrity, his children are blessed after him." Loved ones, how are we to understand this? Was Manoah not a righteous man? What happened with Samson? What happened with him? How did he turn out this way? Loved ones, it has to do with this gap that exists between being a righteous man and a good father. Just because we are a righteous man or woman of God does not mean that we're always a great parent. There's something else to it. How are we to understand this promise of Scripture? Proverbs chapter 20, verse 7. Well, first of all, it's true. Children of righteous parents are blessed. I think we would all agree to that. I would imagine that we all remember our parents, and a lot of us still have our parents, for which we thank God for. But those of us who are raised in godly homes with parents who love Jesus and serve Jesus and His Word with all of their hearts, those of us who can relate to this can say we were blessed to be raised in a home like that. Might not have always obeyed our parents or done what they wanted, but we were blessed. Such parents demonstrated through their lives what it means to serve Jesus, what it means to be a Christian. Righteous parents, they protect their children from the influences of the world, and they make decisions for their children with the best interests of their children in mind. And to be quite honest and transparent, I wasn't raised in this kind of a home. But I often thought how nice it would have been to have had parents who served the Lord during the years of my childhood. However, just because we have or may have had Christian parents doesn't necessarily mean that they were always great parents. And as parents, just because we're Christians who love and serve the Lord doesn't necessarily mean that we're always great parents. Let me give you an example of Manoah's life. We know that he was a righteous man, but let's read the first verses of chapter 14 and see how it goes from there. God's word says, "Now Samson went down to Timnah when he was older and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. So he went up and told his father and mother, saying, I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife." Then his father and his mother, they said to him, "Is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren or among all my people that you must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines?" So here we see that the parents, they knew better. They knew what he was supposed to do, what he was not supposed to do. And Samson said to his father, "Get her for me, for she pleases me." As a Nazirite, Samson was to remain pure and undefiled in all of his ways. And here, he wanted to marry someone from a pagan nation, from a nation who did not even know God, let alone serve him. And one writer says, such marriages with foreigners were prohibited, meaning outlawed for the Israelites. And Samson's request for a wife defied the tradition that allowed parents to arrange the marriage. Back in those ancient times, the parents would find a spouse for you often, someone who pleased them and was from a people that would please the Lord. And not only would this marriage have been prohibited by God, it would have been an embarrassment to his family. The Philistines were Israel's greatest enemies. Marriage to a hated Philistine would have been a disgrace to Samson's family. But Samson's father gave in to Samson's demand and allowed this marriage to happen, even though he had the right to refuse his son, is what another author writes. So why did he give in? He knew better. He was the parent, and he does what his son wanted. Why did he give in? Loved ones, sometimes parents give in to the demands of their children because they want to make them happy, right? Remember at the beginning of this hour, we looked at the word blessed, and we said that blessed means happy. But there's a difference between being blessed as God desires and being happy, right? They want to make their kids happy. They think that if they give their kids what they want, then they'll be happy. Or they allow them to do things that they know are inherently wrong because they want to be liked by their children. They want to be their kids' friends. Have we ever heard that before? Is that a healthy place to be if you're a parent and you want to be your kids' friend? No. That's not a healthy place to be. You love your child, you want your child to love you in return. But we cannot have the expectation that we should be our children's friends. We are their parents. And that's different than being their friend. Because Manoah allowed Samson to pursue an ungodly woman, in chapter 14, Samson saw nothing wrong with doing the exact same thing on multiple occasions in the future, which would eventually lead to his downfall. The strongest man ever lived was brought down by women in his pursuit of godless women. And his parents allowed it. Manoah allowed it. And Christian parents often wonder why their kids turn out the way they do. And here I want to say that sometimes as parents, best We can be good parents, we can be upright parents, but our kids still make their own decisions, and sometimes our kids still veer into a different path than we would want for them. And I'm not talking about that this morning. I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about this gap between being a righteous person and being a good parent. The Christian parents often wonder why their kids turn out the way they do when they have displayed to them what it means to live like a Christian. They live uprightly and they expect their children to do the same. But at times they fail to parent. They fail to parent their children, to instruct their children in the ways of God. They think that it's just enough to live uprightly. But if we look to Proverbs again, we see that Solomon wrote something else. He says in Proverbs 22, verse 6, "Train up a child in the way that he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it." So not only be righteous, but train them up in the ways of God. And fathers play a very important role in this. And I came across an article from Focus on the Family that illustrates just how important fathers are in training up children, or even just simply being part of their lives. Because in our society today, it's hard to find fathers that are even just part of their kids' lives, let alone those that train them up. This is what the author writes about the influence of a father. A father's strength can be powerful. A dad's words can be fueling and inspirational. Hugs from a dad can be deeply comforting. A dad's smiles can instill joy and confidence. Time with a dad can be fun and productive. A dad's physicality can be challenging. A dad's guidance can be life-changing and foundational. A father's correction can be life-saving and life-giving. Adventures with a dad can be exciting and memorable. What's the key word here? Can. It can be. As fathers, we can be incredibly influential. We can be. The potential is there. However, it initially requires us as dads to recognize how important we are, right? We are incredibly important. If you look at statistics today, the amount of children that are raised in fatherless homes is just astounding here in the United States. The majority of children that end up in crime, end up in imprisonment, come from fatherless homes. It's incredible. It shows you that fathers have a role to play. Fathers have a work to do. A dad can bring amazing things to their family. However, it initially requires realizing that you are essential. You're an essential personnel in your home. As a dad, you bring essential teachings, guidance and motivation, correction, love, and feedback. You can give these anywhere and with no limit in creative day-to-day ways. Your impact is foundational and long-lasting. It's amazing. God has given fathers an amazing opportunity to influence their children. And this article also gives some advice for parenting styles. And there's all sorts of different parenting styles that a person can learn from and learn about. But researchers have found that a variety of benefits come from a father's use of an authoritative parenting style. And kids, they don't want to hear that these days. They don't want their parents to lay down the law. They don't want their parents to parent over them. They want their parents to be their friends, to let them do what they want. But research shows that an authoritative parenting style is the most effective. What is that? Well, within an authoritative parenting style, we learn this. It balances sensitivity and warmth with discipline and structure. Within an authoritative parenting style, a father's children are less likely to have emotional and behavioral issues. His children are also more likely to do well socially, academically in school, relationally, and developmentally when he balances high levels of both sensitivity and limits. Now, other research also provides insight into the various and unique benefits a dad can bring in their home and their children's lives. And the following examples describe studies demonstrating the potential results from a father's positive, effective parenting. This is what research shows. A dad's sensitivity early in a boy's life leads to fewer behavior issues later in life. Do we believe that? Yeah. Unity in parenting between a mom and a dad can result in more feelings of intimacy between a husband and wife, especially from a wife toward her husband. And as a result, children have fewer emotional and behavioral issues. So wives, moms, they appreciate when their husbands are a part of their children's lives. They even learn to love them more, or their love for them grows when they see their husband involved in the family. Leads to a healthier marriage. And when kids see a healthy marriage in their parents' lives, guess what? That affects the way that they're raised, how they turn out one day. Sons who have a good relationship with their fathers have fewer emotional, handle stress more effectively, it says. And playing with fathers, including roughhousing, helps children to develop self-control, problem-solving skills, and self-regulation skills. So even something as simple as roughhousing with their kids, the research shows that it's a good thing. It teaches kids lots of different things. And I remember roughhousing with my dad. I was too afraid to do that. He was an ox. Maybe a groat. But it was an important memory that I have growing up. Just even seeing my brothers try to down. They never could until my brother went to police college, and then it was different from there on. But fathers can have a tremendous impact in the lives of their children. And again, this message isn't meant, fathers, to be a hammer on your head. This is just to encourage us. An encouragement that shows that, you know what? The simple, everyday little things in our children's lives makes a humongous difference because those little things add up over time, right? Those little things equal memories that the children will have later that they can look back to and think, yeah, I loved doing this with my dad. My dad took time for me. I want to be just like him one day. Not only did he love the Lord, but he loved me. And that's the gap. That our kids not only see that they love the Lord, but that their parents love them. All of this research shows us that there's a gap between being a righteous person and being a good parent. In order for us to be able to do our best as parents, we need to bridge that gap by training up our children in the ways of the Lord. And as parents, as grandparents, as aunts and uncles, we need to be playing an active role in the lives of our children, the children that God has placed in our lives and in our care. Yes, don't get me wrong. We need to be people of faith, people of prayer who honor, praise, and worship God. But we also need to instill within the hearts of the next generations these same qualities. Could you imagine Samson, the strength that he had, if he would have had the inner strength of his father? Could you imagine everything that God could have done through him instead of the very little that God could do through him? We need to do our part to instill these things within our children, our nieces and nephews, our grandchildren, the people that God has placed in our care. Manoah was a righteous man, a praiseworthy man, but he fell short as a father. And from the examples that we heard at the beginning of this lesson and this study, we know there's other men in God's word that did the same. Men who loved the Lord, but did not share this love for their children. And we want to learn from them. We want to learn from all the good things that they did. And they did a lot of good things. But we also need to learn from the areas where they came too short. Fathers have great potential. They are influential. They are so important to families and to our society as a whole. They need to be appreciated and loved. But as fathers, we need to do our part to train up our children and those whom God has placed in our care. Amen.